Absolutely. Hi. Before we get into our introductions, I want to make sure everyone knows they're in the right place. Today we really want to talk about how you can fall back in love with your CRM. And we know that when many organizations encounter challenges with their CRM, they feel like they need to leave and find something better. But we're here to talk a little bit about what so many of the solutions are that are available to you to help you extend and make your CRM work better for you. And I will start with an introduction of myself. I'm Paige Deegan. I'm an account executive at Heller Consulting. And I come from a fundraising background, so especially happy to be here with you all today amongst colleagues. Spent a decade at a performing arts organization, and then more recently was with Ronald McDonald House Charities of Central Texas. So just really excited to have my fundraising colleagues around me today. And I will pass it to Emily.
Hi there, I'm Emily Finton. I'm AVP of Philanthropy Operations at Kennedy Krieger Institute, which is in Baltimore, Maryland. I've been in fundraising for over 20 years. I spent the first part of my career in animal welfare before switching over to healthcare. I lead a fantastic team of 9 here at Kennedy Krieger. We're focused on donor services, annual giving, stewardship, and data administration. So really happy to join everyone today.
Hello, I'm Jen Abel. I'm the Director of Donor Services at Kennedy Krieger. I have been at Kennedy for 10 years now, and before that, I was in the senior living nonprofit space. I oversee gift processing here, reporting, fundraising technology, everything database.
So Kennedy Krieger is a children's hospital, as I said, based in Baltimore, Maryland. We have an academic affiliation with Johns Hopkins, although we are a completely separate entity and we fundraise separately. The Institute provides interdisciplinary care for children, adolescents, and adults with disorders of the brain and spinal cord. We treat nearly 30,000 patients a year from 50 states and 35 countries around the world. We also operate several schools. On the philanthropy front, we receive gifts from about 6,000 constituents annually. We have 200,000 records in our CRM with data going back to the 1980s. We host a lot of events, including a 5K, a gala, and our largest event, Festival of Trees, which takes place at the Maryland State Fairgrounds every year and draws about 50,000 people at its peak. And we have about 35 people on our fundraising team.
Great. And I'll share a little bit about Heller Consulting. We partnered with Kennedy Krieger for some work that we're going to talk about today. But we have been in the nonprofit technology space for almost 3 decades. We started out as an organization that really just focused on Blackbaud, but have expanded, started doing Salesforce and Microsoft implementations as well as Razor's Edge. And then we also, the focus of today's call is really on our strategy practice. That strategy practice is really a team of people that are focused on helping organizations make technology decisions. And so really helping, improve on challenges that you might be facing with your tech stack as it relates to fundraising. And then the other thing I really wanted to highlight is that we, about 50% of the projects that we work on are fundraising related. We do, programs, implementation, and that kind of work as well. So maybe case management or volunteer related activities, but half is fundraising. And so it means that our consultants have really extensive experience with the business of a development department. So whether it's moves management or events as it relates to your CRM and reporting, we have a lot of that experience, which helps us in an engagement with like an organization like Kennedy Krieger. And I will go over our agenda real quick. First, we're going to talk through some of Kennedy Krieger's challenges and their goals when they came to work with Heller. And then I'm going to share some about our assessment methodology. That's a methodology that we use when we're working with an organization to make technology decisions, but it will also be a framework that can be helpful for your organization to apply to the technology decisions you're making for your department. So we think that'll be really helpful to understand. And then we are going to walk through the decisions that Kennedy Krieger Institute made and the planning and then how they made some of those initial improvements. So let's get started with a little bit of discussion with the Kennedy Krieger team. Jen, can you share a little bit about where Kennedy Krieger started in all of this and how your CRM was serving your organization and department?
Sure. Yeah. So our CRM, which at the time is Razor's Edge NXT, was working really well for lots of things like gift entry. We had a good system for reconciliation with our finance department, and there was a lot of faith in the quality of the data we had. Our data and reporting ranged everywhere from volunteering and memberships to planned giving and tribute giving. All of this information coming into Razor's Edge from a variety of sources. For example, we use One Cause and Donor Drive for events. We use Fundraise Up for our online donation forms and Instrumental for grant applications. Most of this data was coming into Razor's Edge using Importomatic. So while all of that was great, we found that our gift officers weren't really interacting with the system very much. So the operations team was getting lots of repeated requests for lists, metrics, and data. We invested into Designer in NXT in order to try and standardize reporting to the team, but we found that there were still some limitations to what it could provide, including goals, custom fields, and more detailed filters. We also tried to use the pre-built Blackbaud app for Power Platform, but unfortunately, it didn't bring all the needed fields to Power BI to be really useful to us. So we were still left without a good system for our colleagues to view visuals and metrics in real time.
So we've heard a little bit about what your challenges were when you came to work with Heller. Emily, what was the catalyst that led you to really look more seriously at your CRM options and make change?
So a few things happened that led us to do a CRM evaluation. The first was that we had been using Luminate Online, which is an online fundraising platform owned by Blackbaud, for those who aren't familiar. We've been using it for over a decade, and we used the Reload connector to sync all the online data into our offline RENXT database. But we made the move in 2023 off of Luminate onto Donor Drive for peer-to-peer and Fundraise Up for online giving. And that sort of broke us free from the Blackbaud ecosystem a little bit and made us feel like we could look around more. Additionally, our marketing team decided to get Salesforce Nonprofit Success Pack and Salesforce Marketing Cloud. And so we were along for the ride with their implementation, and we were moving our email marketing over into Salesforce. So that was, something that really made us look at other options. We also had new colleagues coming in who had used other systems at other places and, had recommendations for things. And finally, we were under pressure to raise more dollars, as everybody is, and we just wanted to make sure that we were taking advantage of the technology that could help us do that. So because we wanted to make the best decision for our team, and because we wanted to do a systemic review and make sure that we were making a really well-informed choice, we sought a vendor partner and chose Heller to help us in this process.
Yeah, and with that, I think it makes sense to talk a little bit about Heller's methodology. And I'd like to share a little more about that methodology that we've developed to work with organizations over time. First and foremost, I want to highlight that Heller really maintains this strategic practice that is solution agnostic. So while we implement specific solutions, we really want to make sure that our recommendations are specifically to meet the needs of an organization. And so we recommend solutions that we don't implement all of the time. We recently, just a few weeks ago, recommended Virtuous for a client. And so wanted to kind of share that. And so when we start with discovery. That discovery process is really to help Heller understand the strategic priorities of the organization. We want it to represent kind of a broad cross section of of the team that will be affected. And we want also those really key team members who have the greatest subject matter expertise to be involved. So we really start by familiarizing ourselves with strategic goals of the development team, but also of the organization. So, looking at things like strategic plans, fundraising plans and metrics, any of the reporting that you might be doing to your board, just making sure that we understand at the strategic level what you're trying to accomplish. And then, utilizing all of that information, we build out a discovery plan for interviews with your team to make sure that we are fully then understanding the business processes that are happening to meet those plans. So, what kind of challenges are you experiencing, and what are the goals of your organization? What would you like to accomplish in the future with your technology? So once we've done that discovery component, we move into developing requirements. But first, I wanted to share something that Heller does that might be a little bit unique in that we also utilize something called key decision drivers. And those decision-making factors are really kind of a higher level above technical requirements. So these are bigger picture questions, more like, how does your organization value the end user experience with your technology? How much in-house versus, out-of-house expertise do you want to maintain to keep that technology going? How customizable do you think that your technology needs to be to meet your needs? And so that kind of frames the bigger picture decision making. And then we also develop technical requirements. Heller, we maintain a really broad list of functional requirements for development departments based on really extensive experience working over thousands of projects with nonprofits that have, overlapping requirements. So we're able to use that as a foundation for the most common needs within nonprofit organizations. We can eliminate some of those where they don't apply and then augment where organizations have really specific, unique needs for their department. And so once we've built out that really robust list of needs, we move into the determining your tech needs section, because those needs, there's no real system that's going to meet every single need. So we have to kind of work through a prioritization process. We use something called the Moscow method, which stands for must, should, could, and won't. And that really helps us understand which of your core requirements absolutely must be there in any CRM system that you might implement, and which ones are, nice to have, might be icing on the cake. And so then we move into evaluation and selection of tools. We use those prioritized requirements to really narrow down to what solutions will make the most sense for a deeper evaluation. We'll get into a little bit later more around Kennedy Krieger's the specific avenues that we explored for Kennedy Krieger. But ultimately, we're looking at a combination of requirements and key decision drivers as we analyze the potential solutions and make a final recommendation for organizations. So we'd love to share a little more about how that methodology applied in the case of Kennedy Krieger. Jen, can you walk us through how Heller involved your team in this process? And then I would love to pass it to Emily about some of the goals that we uncovered and kind of solidified during the project.
Sure. So we made sure to involve all the different teams in our department, like our frontline fundraisers, the events team, our foundations team, throughout this process in order to seek input and share their priorities, because we know that they're always different from ours as the operations team. We wanted these end users to feel well informed about the process because we needed their buy-in in order to make best use of whatever CRM we ultimately chose. In order to keep them involved, we provided updates throughout the stages of the decision-making process. Heller took all of that information from those discovery calls and consolidated them into a manageable list of needs and wants for us to then prioritize. So we used that Moscow method that Paige referenced to mark each item as a must, could, should, or won't in order to arrive at our ultimate set of goals.
And so it was a long list of goals. I'll just highlight a few here. First and foremost, as Jen referenced earlier, dashboards and reporting. This was a big one because we were frustrated by the limitations of the built-in NXT tools. And we were trying to shift our team culture to be more results and metrics driven. Additionally, we were concerned about integration with online fundraising platforms and email marketing tools. This was very important. We had always been told and heard from a number of vendors that RENXT or Blackbaud products in general don't really play nicely with other tools. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't walk into a situation where we were sucking up resources trying to keep things synced. And then finally, real-time goal tracking. We want our gift officers looking at numbers all the time, creating greater accountability and creating more of a self-service method of looking at numbers. And then finally, good value for the price. Everybody wants to spend less. We all know technology is very expensive. And we were also hoping for a system that wouldn't require us to hire an additional FTE.
Absolutely. And one quick note, I'll just mention if you could put your questions in the chat, or not in the chat, in the section that is next to the chat, we'll make sure that we cover those at the end. So before we get into some of the more granular information about Kennedy Krieger's evaluation, I thought it would be helpful to share some more foundational information about the approaches that are available in the marketplace. So when you're approaching the marketplace, you're often coming from a product strategy approach, primarily because those are the types of places that organizations start with their CRM. So it can be really important to kind of understand the differences between the two approaches. So in this platform category on the left, that's going to include things like Salesforce and Microsoft Dynamics 365. Those are the most common type of platforms for nonprofit organizations using a CRM platform. And some of the benefits of using a platform approach is that it can really be deeply customized to meet your needs. There may be expense associated with that customization, but if you have something really specific you're looking to accomplish, you can usually do it. And it also is going to be an option that for enterprise organizations will allow them to scale and also bring additional departments in. I think I alluded to this earlier, but some organizations are looking to consolidate some of their activities into a centralized platform where they have a lot of overlapping data. These systems also allow for greater integration. So you'll have a lot more options for the tools that you might be able to integrate with the platform because there are pre-built connectors, for example, between, a bunch of different email marketing solutions and Salesforce, for example. So there is a trade-off though. Having a platform approach really does mean needing more technical in-house expertise. So the ownership of the CRM falls onto you at the nonprofit level rather than the vendor. And so that, is something that needs to be considered when looking at the different approaches. And it also means that a lot of the maintenance activities all need to be carried out in-house, whereas you might have updates happening more at the product level with the product. So on the product side, that does include Blackbaud Razor's Edge NXT, as well as many that you may have heard of many times, Virtuous, Neon, Bloomerang, Donor Perfect. I mean, the list goes on and on. We've all had experience with a lot of these different products. And there are also benefits to utilizing a product approach. You typically are going to have a vendor that is ultimately responsible for that product, and they're maintaining it, updating it. They're frequently going to be providing more training resources as well as specifically identified integrations that work for their product. And then the kind of trade-off is that it's really built to serve one department or function. So you're not typically going to have a solution that serves a whole bunch of different departments. So in the case of Blackbaud Razor's Edge NXT, we know it's really intended for development or advancement work. And then another, kind of trade-off is you won't be able to customize it as much. It's already, pre-customized in its product to do what a fundraising product is supposed to do. And so you aren't able to make as many changes to that foundational design. So those are that's like the big picture view of the options on the market. And with Kennedy Krieger, we started with a lot of different options and really narrowed down to two key things to explore. So one that was a product approach and one that was a platform approach, so that we were evaluating the two different approaches with the best potential option of each of those approaches. So to lay out the finalist decision, we really had narrowed it down to Blackbaud and extending it and improving upon the way that it's being used within the organization, and Salesforce. And I'd love, Emily, if you could share some of the pros and cons we explored that you considered for both approaches.
Sure. So one of the pros of staying with RENXT for us was taking a look at the priorities for our team in the coming years. We had had turnover, we had had growth, so we were in the midst of orienting a new team. And we also were looking at supporting a big new strategic plan and a very large campaign at the Institute. And by staying on RENXT, we could avoid the drain on our resources that it would take to migrate and train. We had heard from other organizations that a migration, we know it could be a multi-year process. We've heard about other orgs having to maintain two systems for more than a year. So we just knew that would really sidetrack our operations team and others. Additionally, those who use NXT know that many features have been promised for years and have rolled out very slowly, but we had noticed in recent years that things seem to be changing a little bit more quickly, and we were feeling good about what we were seeing there. Challenge of staying for us, some internal politics. Many are familiar with the challenging relationship that sometimes exists between philanthropy and marketing. We knew that our marketing team would be disappointed if we did not move over to Salesforce with them. So we had to manage expectations there if we chose to stay. And we also knew that creating the integrations that we would need to create if we stayed with NXT would be a challenge, and we weren't totally clear on what the lift would be there for our team. The pros of Salesforce, very clearly, strong argument for moving everything into one system and having one source of truth for a lot of reasons. We knew that. We also knew that would allow for some future growth. We also knew Salesforce, as Paige has mentioned, highly customizable, endless apps to be added. So just a lot of possibility there. The challenge, as referenced earlier, we didn't really want to have to hire an additional FTE, and we knew we would likely need that if we transitioned. While Jen and I and others had done some Salesforce training, we were certainly not Salesforce architects. And we were also aware of all the costs associated with all the add-ons that you do need for Salesforce. And we've seen with our experience in the marketing team that it can balloon pretty quickly.
So I think on what is probably apparent from the webinar title alone, we'd still love to kind of hear a little bit more about the approach Kennedy Krieger committed to through this process. Heller's final recommendation really was this choice between Salesforce and the extension of Razor's Edge through the Microsoft Power Platform. And Emily, I'd love for you to share a little bit more about the outcome of that recommendation.
Sure. So, after going through this process with Heller and taking a really hard look at things, we did in fact decide to stay with NXT. Fortunately, our leadership was supportive of this plan, and our colleagues were happy, that they weren't going to have to learn a new system and that they were going to have access to new tools. So what we did is sign another 3-year contract for NXT, and made a plan that we're going to do annual evaluations to look at where we are, where we're headed. It's quite possible that someday we will need to move towards having a single system, but for now, we feel pretty confident that we've made a good choice.
And I'll also just note that before beginning this decision-making process, Emily and I had both seen some sessions at an AASP conference where another organization had success using Power BI dashboards. We then attended a dashboard in a day training provided by Microsoft in order to attempt our own dashboards. And that training really gave us the confidence that we would be able to configure and maintain dashboards ourselves.
Yeah, and so as Jen is alluding to, one of the recommendations that we made for extending Razor's Edge with the Microsoft Power Platform really was around data visualization and utilizing Power BI to create those interactive dashboards and reports. We also, know that there are specific users that need specific reports and groups of users. And the real benefit of what is happening with Blackbaud and Microsoft currently is that you're able to then use those reports that you're developing in Power BI to visualize them back in your Razor's Edge environment. So people are not having to switch between systems in order to see some of the dashboards that you're developing. So that was part of our recommendation, as well as you'll see the OMATIC integration for segmentation. Despite not moving to Salesforce for the philanthropy team, there was still a need for the ability to use the data that's in Razor's Edge for segmentation on the marketing side. So we have developed an OMATIC integration that allows some of that biographical data that is really critical for segmentation. So for example, board membership, and then also gift data, last gift date, gift size, that sort of thing. It allows for that data to be utilized in Salesforce for segmentation. And so provides better interoperability between the departments in that way. We have some examples of these dashboards to share. So I will advance to some examples of those. And then Jen, if you could walk us through some of these improvements, that would be great.
Yeah, so here you can see an example of a Power BI dashboard that Heller built for us. We collaborated with them in order to determine exactly which metrics and visuals would serve our department based on what we heard during those initial discovery calls with our different teams. It might be a little hard to see here, but this screenshot shows that this dashboard is actually embedded within Razor's Edge. This has been helpful in encouraging our gift officers and other team members to actually get in and use the dashboards. Since they're already in Razor's Edge, they can just click a link and it'll pop this dashboard right up for them. You can see a few different visuals here, and then there's some slicers on the left where you can filter data by gift officer, gift type, date, and everything else that you might want to see. And you can see some totals and progress towards goal, and that changes depending on what filter you have. So we created 3 different dashboards, and each have a few different pages of reports included. Our leadership dashboard, you can see on an example on the right here, includes things like overall fundraising totals year over year, board participation, and we were able to recreate a monthly report that we had been manually creating each month using exports and pivot tables in Excel. So that saved a lot of time each month. So in this bright blue report on the right, Heller was able to create thermometers for current year and prior year fiscal year progress towards goal and pace towards goal. We can share these types of visuals with leadership within Kennedy Krieger, as well as internally within our department. On the other side, we also have an individual dashboard and team dashboard. So individual gift officers can use the individual one, and then teams can see their progress as well. We have everything from actions, opportunities, and recent gift lists included as well. So here you can see our OMATIC integration. We have a few different formulas set up in order to bring all the information we might need from Razor's Edge to Salesforce in order to do these segmentations for emails. We bring over mostly biographical data, but also things like opt-out, of course, and first gift, last gift, largest gift amounts, and membership. We also have a formula that moves data back from Salesforce to Razor's Edge, mostly for opt-out data.
Awesome. So we're going to go a little bigger picture again and just start to think about kind of like what the reasons might be for investing in your current CRM versus, making a full scale migration. When you have some of these challenges going on within your organization, it can sometimes feel like the only solution is to leave and choose something else. But there really are a lot of benefits that you can see from investing in the current solution you have. Jen, is there anything that you would like to highlight about what you've learned through this process with Kennedy Krieger?
Yes, we definitely learned to keep an open mind and look at all the options in the marketplace based on our specific organizational needs. I think it can be really easy to just choose to stick with what you know or just cave to the external pressure of switching to the new shiny platform that everybody else is using. But I think being able to go through this whole discovery and evaluation process made us feel confident that we were making the right informed decision. And as we mentioned before, we haven't closed the door to change in the future. This is going to be an ongoing evaluation.
Yeah. And finally, I mean, Emily, do you have any advice for organizations that are facing challenges with their CRM?
Well, I guess I should start by saying, if you have an opportunity to partner with a group like Heller, having that kind of expertise is amazing because, they know other systems and have seen them in action, which is a lot different than just getting a sales pitch. But I would say, start by talking to all of your users, identify the problems, look for trends in those problems, think about whether these are actually just training issues that could be resolved. It's possible that just, some additional training within the team could solve a lot of issues. Also connect with other users. I know there's some really good user groups out there where we've gotten a lot of advice. Chances are somebody else has experienced the same problem and might be able to help you solve it. Related to what Jen mentioned, avoid being sold a flashy tool that promises to do everything. In our experience, every tool has pros and cons. There's no perfect solution. And then, this one, not everybody gets this choice, but try to avoid a situation where a top leader who doesn't actually use the system is dictating, a platform transition. That only leads to heartache from what I've seen. And then lastly, I think, that this was a really big one for us. Look at the priorities on your team at the moment. We all have limited resources, a limited number of people, and we can only do so much. So a migration might not be right for you at that moment.
Absolutely. I also think I would be remiss, the improvements that are available to Kennedy Krieger don't stop at those initial investments that they've made. We did outline a few additional opportunities that are potentially on the horizon for the organization that could help with some of the additional pain points that the org was experiencing. So you can use that Power Platform to do more automated data capture, which can really cut down on some of the manual processes you might have. One good example of this is collecting pledges. And so there are a lot of opportunities to automate things using the Power Platform. There's also, great opportunity to use a lot more of the embedded, we call them a tile, but the tiles that you can embed from Power Platform that will help you really create more customized views for perhaps gift officers or leaders while not needing that to be functionality that is available within Razor's Edge NXT. And then there's also the ability to use the Power Platform for more integration purposes. So helping integrate with a third-party tool. In the instance of what we've discussed here, we are utilizing Omatic for some of that, but there are also opportunities for doing other integration type of work where you can push data from one place to another. So love exploring all of the different opportunities that might be available. Jen, is there anything on the horizon from your front that you are planning to continue rolling out for your organization?
Yes, definitely. We wanted to focus first and foremost on dashboards just because those were, the thing that would get used the most and be the most helpful for our frontline fundraisers. But In the future, we're really interested in the automation opportunities in terms of automated acknowledgements, some of the things that Paige mentioned before, as well as the connection to Microsoft Teams. We've gotten lots of requests for, gift alerts. So if a gift comes in, we'd like to get an alert. Lots of options there. And then also, as we're rolling out these dashboards, we're getting feedback, which is great, about more things that gift officers would like to see, more metrics, which just shows that it's working and they're liking what they're seeing. So we're going to start building out some more things that they want to see.
Awesome. Well, I think that we are now at time for questions. I do understand that there are a lot of questions, so I do want to say up front, if we don't get to all of your questions, we'll definitely we'll follow up with you to help make sure that we answer your questions offline. I do know we're going to start with a poll. So that poll should be launched, and then I will go ahead and take some questions while everyone is answering that poll so that we give you all some time to respond to that poll. So I do have a question from Donna Faulkner, who asked, with the integrations you have implemented, are you using RE Database View or RE NXT Web View? If you are in RE, will your integrations also work in RE NXT? So I think one thing that, the integrations that we're talking about are definitely with RE NXT. And so we're pretty aware of the Razor's Edge environment right now, where there is the plan for them to sunset Database View in mid-2026. And so I think that is something to definitely keep in mind as you're thinking about investing in Razor's Edge specifically. So definitely that's something to plan for now if a lot of your business processes are all happening in Database View. I think, and I'm seeing the second part of the question, if you're in RE, will your integrations also work in RE NXT? I think that there is a lot that will not transfer from Razor's Edge Database View to RE NXT. I am not fully versed on exactly what that might look like, but I do know that a lot of organizations that have built a lot of custom things for their database view are going to have to rebuild once they get into NXT and start using it. So I'm happy to follow up with you, Donna, on that and explore in more detail if you have specific questions about what your integrations look like. So I'll definitely follow up. I have another question, Ritza, and I apologize if I'm mispronouncing, Ritza Francosi. What about CRMs that haven't been organized or managed in a while? How would you coach a new hire who is in charge of clearing out the clutter? I can start a little bit, but would then love to pass it to maybe Jen, who has a lot of experience with the very technical and like data oriented part of this. I think one of the things that we really think through when we're doing a data strategy project, for example, is to evaluate what of the data you really need in order to move forward. So one thing, and this is a Razor's Edge example, but it applies to all CRMs, attributes and constituency codes can have a lot of old data that's no longer being utilized. And so I think really looking through your data to see where you have things that are no longer serving you and whether you need to purge of that. There also is an expense associated with keeping every single piece of data that you have. And so we coach organizations to really think through what their data retention policy needs to be around, how far back do they really need to go, especially if the solution they have has incremental costs associated with the size of the database. And it really just depends on your specific organization and how far back you need to go in a operational standpoint. Jen, do you have anything that you would add there?
I would just say data audits, start cleaning up the data, and you can use some of these automations to help bring some inconsistencies forward and help you to clean that up.
Yeah. It looks like we do have a poll result, and I am trying to pull that up right now so I can see it. And it's what's one thing you most wish your CRM did or did better? And it looks like the winning response there is provided better reporting and analytics. And I think that's super relevant for our conversation today, especially since that's one of the challenges Kennedy Krieger was having. And the only thing I'll add is that, something like Power BI can be utilized with many different products. It doesn't have to be Razor's Edge NXT. And so looking at data visualization options outside of what is available in your CRM is definitely something that can help organizations. Let me look, and I apologize, I lost my chat screen.
I can take this one.
Okay, great. Yeah.
Emily asks, can you share a bit more about how you utilize Omatic for segmentation? And it's less about using Omatic specifically for the segmentation, but more about using Omatic to get that segmentation data into Salesforce. And then we use reporting tools in Salesforce in order to create reports to send emails through Marketing Cloud. So for just one example, if we did last gift date, we synced last gift date over so that we could segment to everyone who was given in the past month.
Awesome. And we have another question from Candace Noakes, who asked, our senior leadership wants to move from Razor's Edge NXT to Tessitura. We need a new box office system, and having one CRM is desirable, but I believe RE NXT is the better fundraising system. Have you seen other organizations make this transition successfully without sacrificing fundraising? I actually came from an organization that transitioned from Razor's Edge to Tessitura. So this is very relevant to my past experience. I do think I agree with what you're saying around the fundraising, sacrificing a little bit for your fundraising functionality in Tessitura. And it's not that the functionality is worse, it's that there is a little bit more customization required in Tessitura for it to work. But what I will say from the standpoint of the performing arts organization where I was is that was offset. I think it really depends upon the organization. But for us, the ability to have the data all integrated where, for example, I could have simple automations built that would pull day of show lists where I could see where donors were sitting and that sort of thing. That wasn't possible in the previous environment. So for us, it was worth it. But I would say it kind of depends on your specific use cases and how much of that ticketing really informs your fundraising, if that makes sense. But that's very high level, and I'd be happy to talk to you in more detail since I lived that. We have another question from Donna Faulkner that says, with so many nonprofits having a small team, how can this be scaled down when there are only 1 to 2 people who work within RE NXT and development teams of 3 to 4 people? Emily, I don't know if you have anything you would add there. And if you don't, I'm happy to field this one.
Well, I can start by saying, if you are in the Microsoft 365 ecosystem, then you should have access to the Power BI tools. And as Jen referenced earlier, we did some training on our own and were able to develop some skills internally. Now on a tiny team, not that you have a lot of free time in your day to do training, but I would say it is a tool that you could begin to learn.
Yeah, and there is a lot of because of it being so widely adopted kind of across industries, there are a lot of resources available, even just y'all mentioning the trainings that you went to where you were able to see how you might actually in a hands-on way utilize it. So I think that a lot of that self-driven activity is more available for something like a Power BI than some other options if you were wanting to get your hands dirty. Seeing some. Okay, so we have another question that's come through that is, what have you put in place to enable adoption? And would love to hear from one of my colleagues at Kennedy Krieger about adoption.
Yeah, I can take this one. So after we showed the team where the dashboards were within Razor's Edge, how to get to them every day, we did still need to field a couple, requests of the same reports that they've been asking for. And so it's just a matter of showing them where they are again and again and saying, oh, you can find the answer here. It's updated hourly, which they love to hear. And then we're also encouraging our team leaders to lean more on metrics during their one-on-ones, and so that we can encourage some accountability to entering the data in there and then using the dashboards.
Awesome. Yeah, and I would say others who work in philanthropy operations, I'm sure, just like us, spend a lot of time reminding people where to find things. It's just the nature of the job.
Yeah. Absolutely. We have a question that I think is super relevant for Jen and Emily from Flynn Ashley, who asked, can you speak on the differences between managing a CRM for an annual fund or annual support and managing a CRM for a comprehensive capital campaign? What are the important things to keep in mind while balancing both? And I think that's such a great question. I don't know, Emily, if you have any initial thoughts on that, or Jen.
I would say for us, it's not that different. All the same principles apply. I mean, for annual giving, we're focused more on segmentation and good data. And for for a campaign, we're really needing our gift officers to get into the system. And that's a culture shift for us. And within XT, it's intended to be a daily interaction for your gift officers. They should be logging in, looking at their workspace, looking at their reminders, entering follow-up actions. And that's been a lot of work for us to convince people to work in that way. But I would say that's really more of a difference in managing major donors versus lower level campaigns. I don't know if you have anything to add, Jen.
Yeah, I'll just say from like a data perspective, it's basically the difference is what kind of data you're storing. So for more of the annual support, you're looking towards appeals and gifts, obviously, but the capital campaign, we're leaning more on opportunities and prospect status stages and things like that.
Yeah, the only other thing that comes to mind for me too is that there might be a slightly different group of end users that are needing to access the data, especially when you start talking about volunteer fundraisers. So I'm sure that is something that has to be thought through, as far as especially these dashboards might be useful for those, if you're talking about like a capital campaign committee, for example, really useful to build out for them where they're not necessarily in the CRM, but having access to some of that reporting is really helpful. We do have another question from Bridget Jones, who asked for recommendations for training, peer groups, advice specifically for starting with Power BI and RE NXT data. Yeah, I don't know if Emily and Jen, is there anything that you were initially accessing that that really helped you kind of get a leg up? I know you mentioned that dashboard in a day, and I wonder if you could share a little more about where you found that.
Yeah, I think it was just on Microsoft. I Googled Microsoft dashboard in a day. I'm not sure if it was included because we have the licenses through our institute, but it was free for us and it was very helpful. It takes you from the ground up. I would pair that with Blackbaud's has a whole section of their website in the Blackbaud community. I'm just trying to see if I can pull it up real quick to tell you exactly what it is. It's the Blackbaud Community Power Platform Template Showcase. They have a whole 6-week, I think, pre-recorded training that shows you how to connect your systems. And this template showcase has pre-built Power Automate templates to really be able to get the most use out of your systems.
Yeah, I do know that that Blackbaud has been really preparing a lot more resources for organizations, so I would explore that for sure. We do have one more question. What were you surprised by as part of this project? Jen, I don't know if you have anything you were surprised by specifically on the technical side.
I think we briefly mentioned this earlier, but we were always kind of told that Blackball doesn't play well with other systems. And so I think we were happily surprised that we were able to connect using Omatic and then using just the pre-built connectors and Power Automate in order to get this data syncing hourly.
That's awesome. Well, at the moment, I'm not seeing any other questions. But if there were some, and I know we're probably almost at time, if there are any questions that we missed, my indomitable marketing director who has been administering the question portion will let us know. Oh, there is one more that we might be able to address. Sherry Lynn Eugenio, could you please explain how the integration between NXT and your online fundraising platform works in practice? How seamless is the data syncing between the two systems? For example, are donor records, donation details, and event participation automatically updated in real time? I imagine that is likely a question for you, Jen, as far as how your online fundraising is working with NXT.
Yes, and I'll say, coming from Illuminate Online, it's not as seamless as that RELO connector. And I swear I'm not being paid by Omatic, but that's what we use to sync our data from both Donor Drive and Fundraise Up into Razor's Edge. So it's just a daily import that we do. And in terms of seamless, I mean, Omatic does a really good job of matching with existing records in order to not create duplicates.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think to the question around real time, I think typically that is the real time part is with Omatic or most of the options that are available. It's more like a daily process or something like that. Yeah. And I think we are about out of time, but we would absolutely love to stay connected with any of you who joined today. Find us on LinkedIn. I'm sure we'll be sharing some information post webinar, and would love to stay connected with any of you. Feel free to reach out.
On behalf of AFP Global, I would like to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar live stream. Please take a moment to complete our survey, which helps us program future events.